Hello, hi guys, and assalamu alaikum. My name is Yusuf, and I hope I am quite familiar with among all of you people by now. Well, basically, today I'm here, and the purpose that I'm here in front of you people is this that today I am going to be shifting up from ESL lessons, and gradually today we are going to be moving on to a more practical oriented lesson delivery that's going to be done by me. Now, all of you would be wondering that what that thing basically is going to be and what is something that I'm going to be doing now. That why am I emphasizing on this thing that there is going to be something new for you people. Well, guys, from ESL activities, now we are going to be moving on to the aspirants and all those people out there who want to become CSS officers and who are really, having a vision or an aim in their mind and they want to do something for themselves. So, we're going to move on for that particular purpose. Now, what? We are going to be doing what? That I'm going to be taking you guys along few optional subjects that are there, and gradually the optional subject that I'm going to be taking you people along is going to be European history. Now, a lot of you would be thinking, why European history? Means, why is Yusuf even going for European history? Well, guys, European history is a subject that holds the key over here. People who have the O-level background, they really, have a little bit of idea regarding this thing up that in Cambridge when they are studying it up, they know why and how or what were the things or what were the events that took place. But for people who don't come from the Cambridge background, it always, it's quite troublesome to go across different books that have been written by different authors, and they eventually have to get a lot of things done in order to prepare for this particular subjects. And as far as European history is concerned, there are very few people who have a great deal of idea regarding all the particular things that eventually took place. And this is something that I'm going to be helping you people out. Now, the basic purpose that I am delivering this lesson, or I am going to be covering the European history subject as a start, is what? The basic purpose is very simple, guys. And the purpose is what? The purpose is this that I want all you aspirants to, at the same time that you guys are studying it up, but the problem is this that you guys need to be very well aware regarding each and everything with the dates, and always remember one thing up, guys. If you want to go through history, history is something that you need to prepare it in the right timeline and the correct manner. And that correct manner is going to be something which I'm going to be taking you people along. I'm quite confident that after going through my lessons on European history, each and every one of you who opts for this subject is going to be benefited, and is going to be benefited to such an extent that your paper can be attempted in a very easy manner. And not only that, guys, because of the fact that it's going to be a competition exam, so you would eventually prefer, want, and the only thing that would be coming in your mind is this that you want to get as many good marks as possible. So follow it up the way I tell you people out. Now what, guys? Before we move on, let me tell you people that what is the topic that we're going to be going on with. The topic that we eventually are going to be discussing for today is something that, if I say in simple words, it totally changed the entire history of Europe. And not only Europe, but it had a huge impact on all the other countries that were surrounding Europe at the same time. And there was a huge change that took place after that. Every one of us knows what monarchy is, or who monarchs were, and what was the role that they eventually used to play. But the thing is this that getting rid of those monarchs, it was something that really required guts. And that is eventually what happened. and when did it happen and where did it happen? That basically is the question. Well, basically, the French Revolution is the landmark, guys. You need to keep this thing in mind, and at the same time, you need to remember the date. The date was what? It was the year of 1789. And what was it? The French Revolution. Now, the French Revolution in the year 1789, it totally changed the course of each and everything that was there. But before we go on to that, we need to understand few things. Now, what are those few things that we need to understand? Basically, the thing is this, as I mentioned to you people, that there needs to be a timeline that we people eventually have to follow. So, there are few contents that I have prepared for you people, and I want you people to just learn this particular starting topic in this manner, and I assure you one thing. If you prepare it in this particular manner, keeping the dates and each and everything in mind, I'm sure you people are going to be benefited to such an extent that it's really going to be having splendid result on your part, and you're going to be totally clear. Okay, guys, so without any ado, now let's move on to the contents. The first thing that we are going to be discussing is going to be what? The first thing that we're going to be discussing whenever we talk about the French Revolution is going to be obviously its causes. What are the causes of the French Revolution? Now, this is something that holds the key, and we're going to be discussing it in detail. All right. After that, the next thing after the French Revolution causes, the next thing that we're going to be discussing is going to be the rise of the third estate. Now, what was the third estate? How did it get formed? This is also something that we are going to be having a look at. Then came a very remarkable event that totally changed each and everything. No one was expecting it because nothing of such sort ever happened. And the people who belong to this particular class, I'll tell you people what I'm talking about, which class. They took a tennis court oath. Now, a tennis court oath is something which again would be, having you people think and ponder about something, that what basically was a tennis court oath and what happened over there, what would someone do in a tennis court. Anyhow, that was also something that was important, then marked the very remarkable event of the Bastille. There was an attack that was done, and Bastille basically is what? It was that particular place which marked the symbol of the monarchy at that particular time in France. And having that thing done by the normal commoners, it was something that required a lot of guts and willingness, that I would say, on the part of such people. The next thing that you people need to be cleared on is it's gonna be the declaration of the right of man and of the citizens that were there in France. Then came the French Revolution, but this time the problem that popped up was what? The problem that popped up was this, guys, that the French Revolution became radical, and because of being so much radical, eventually we moved to the next event that took place. The next event after that was the Reign of Terror. Reign of Terror, it was something that really shook everyone, and the people of France who started a revolution, they never thought that their revolution could end up being such catastrophic for people and eventually become a cause of so many people's death. After the Reign of Terror, then came what? Then came the French, or in other words, the French supremacy is a very good word that can be used here. But I won't say about French supremacy over here. The thing that happened after that was what? It came, the French Revolution basically ended, and all those particular representatives of the so-called French Revolution, they just were taken over by a general, in other words, a dictator known as Napoleon Bonaparte. and that marked the supremacy of that particular dictator, who then further on dictated terms known as the Napoleonic era. And this is the whole course content that we are going to be covering in today's lesson. Now, the basic purpose is what, guys? The basic purpose is very simple. I am not going to be that particular individual who is going to be going along with those things that are going to be, useless for you people, because I know this thing very well, that all those aspirants who are looking at me right now, your time is really precious. And I would not prefer this thing up that if you guys are looking at me, your time gets wasted in any sort. So that is the reason why I pinpointed these 8 important events that really should be, a part of the origin of the French Revolution, what happened during the French Revolution, in which all those points are going to be covered up, and eventually how did it ended up, and what were the reasons that caused it to be, the revolution that started off with a very hype, and it, brought to terms a lot of things, but eventually the French Revolution ended up in a very, bizarre manner. So these are the particular things that we're gonna go on. Anyhow, guys, the first thing that I discussed with you people was what were the causes of the French Revolution. Now, we people need to understand that the French Revolution, it basically was something that, it was the requirement of that particular time. Now, why would I say it that it was the requirement of that particular time? Because if we have a look at France in the year of 1789, the thing that was there was what? That the French citizens, means the people who were there in France, and that people, or those people who were present, they covered round about 98% of the total population of France. They eventually did not have any particular privileges or rights. There were very heavy taxes that were imposed on those people, and they were not at all happy with the performance of the monarch who was present with them at that particular time. Now, over here, you need to remember the name of that particular monarch, because that is extremely important. His name is King Louis XVI. So King Louis XVI is someone you really need to know. And King Louis XVI had a very different thing as compared to his ancestors. His ancestors would have ruled France the way they had done, but King Louis XVI had never expected that what is going to come his way. And eventually that is what happened. The thing that came his way was something that was too unpredictable, not only on his part, but on the part of all the other privileged classes that were present in France at that particular time. So, the basic thing was what? That French Revolution, it popped up and it reshaped not only France, but it had a huge impact on the entire Europe as a whole. Okay, guys, so let's go on now. The first thing that we're going to be moving on is going to be what basically became the cause. The first cause that was there was during the 18th century. What happened that during the 18th century, France eventually became a part of a lot of different, expeditions, I would say, wars, I would say. It became a part of so many extravagant spendings that were done by King Louis XVI and his predecessors, that eventually the country was on the verge of being bankrupt, and they were on the verge of having, bankruptcy that was there. This was a very integral part, or a very integral, I would say, element that eventually caused the French Revolution to even, origin of the French Revolution to even emerge and pop up. Basically, what happened, guys? Basically, the thing was this, that all the poor people who were present at that time, they were, with poor, I don't mean only the peasants. I hope all of you are clear with the word peasants. Peasants basically refer to those particular individuals who used to work for the feudals, and we even have an idea regarding it up that eventually they were from hand to mouth all the time. So because of the fact that this, there was like even one more very huge problem that popped up over there in France was this, that those people who were commoners, they were going through a lot because of the fact they had to face the problem of drought that was taking place at that time. There were cattle diseases that were there, and eventually the main and the most important thing that what these people obviously want is not that they want some extraordinary or lavish food, their table should be filled with so many stuff. The basic thing that they wanted was what? Bread. And that was something that was unable to be afforded by the major urban poor community of France along with the peasants. So this is something that really had the people of that particular time come out of it, and they eventually wanted to um, go against the will of the monarch at that time. Eventually, it led to so much of hatred that riots broke out and the looting started taking place, and eventually, this marked the event that Louis XVI had never ever imagined in his life. What was that event, guys? That he eventually had to summon the Estates General. Now, a lot of you would not be aware regarding what an Estate General basically is. A State General was basically like an assembly that was there in France at that time. And it was basically divided of different classes. Like for instance, the clergy, the nobility class, the middle class, all these three classes were included in that particular estate general. That basically it comprised of what? It comprised of France clergy, the nobility class, and the third participant in that was obviously the middle class. As I have told you people before, that the middle class almost covered that 98% of the total population of France. But for the amazement of the people of France, the thing which happened was this, that this Estates General had last time been called up or summoned up by the king in the year 1614. So this clearly shows that how and what was the extent to which people had been deprived of their basic rights, and how suppressed and how unhappy they were with the monarch of that particular time, who was none other than King Louis XVI. Now what happened, guys? The next thing after that was what? It was that there was another problem that eventually took place. Another problem was this, that this Estates General, it had a very imbalanced sort of a voting system. What was that imbalanced sort of a voting system? That was this, that if the clergies and the nobles along with the monarch, if they wanted, they could overrule the decision that was taken by the middle class. And as I have told you people, the entire burden of each and everything fell on whom? It fell on the middle class. So the middle class was not at all happy, they were not content, and they eventually had their grievances. Anyhow, the rise of the State General is going to be the next important topic. So, what happened, how it happened, and eventually the main point that you people need to go through in order to understand it up is what I'm going to be telling with you people. Alright, guys. As I've mentioned before, I'll again repeat this thing up for you people. Now we are going to be discussing the rise of the State General. The rise of the State General was something that was, it was something that really just came on with the uprising that took place, and it eventually was the result of all the decisions that were taken not only by King Louis at that time, but also the clergy and the nobles of that particular time which were there in France. Anyhow, the, obviously the meeting took place, and when the meeting took place, eventually the things did not go out well, because the decisions that were wanted by the, obviously, the middle class men, or the, the individuals who had their grievances, they were not fulfilled by, and they were, in other words, I won't say fulfilled, but they were not catered, and eventually there were a lot of problems that popped up. So eventually what happened, the Estates General meeting, it eventually took place, and on June 17 there was a very important event that, marked it out, and that event was the tennis court oath. Now what happened over here? Over here, the thing which happened was this, that after Louis XVI did not fulfill, or did not cater, or did not even consider the grievances of the people of that particular time in France, eventually they met up at a tennis court oath, and on June 17th they took an oath. Now basically this oath, it marks the key here, and this basically was what, that this basically even established a new general, or a new assembly that was assembled over there. All the top middle class men, educated ones at that particular time, they all assembled, and they wanted to now overthrow the king and wanted to go against him up. So the first step that they eventually had to take was what? The Bastille and the Great Fear. Now this is the next thing that you need to keep in mind. On June 12th, known as the National Assembly now, they eventually obviously were meeting with each another, and the things were going on. They were discussing about how the things are going to go along. They eventually wanted to they wanted to challenge the writ of the king. And for that particular purpose, the best place that they could do that was, and in order to leave a mark on Louis XVI, they eventually planned to attack Bastille. Now, the attack that was planned to, Bastille was something that was really out of the box. No one predicted about it, and this was something that, even the king was not expecting. So, eventually, what happened? On July the 14th, a huge group of people of that particular time, they stormed the Bastille fortress. Now guys, you guys need to keep one thing clearly in your mind, that Bastille was not referring to any ordinary fortress. It was basically that particular fortress which used to mark the power of the royal family. Attacking that place by commoners, it was a very huge thing. If we have a look at the people, and if we have a look at the rights that were there with the king at that particular time, so this was something that eventually tend to happen, and this was something that totally changed the entire dimension of the French Revolution. So the next event that you people need to keep in your mind is gonna be what? The next event that you people need to keep in your mind is gonna be the Bastille attack that was done by them. After that, the Bastille attack eventually happened, the next thing that the people of that particular time they felt was what? They felt this thing up, that the peasants or the peasants of that particular time, they were the ones who were even deprived of their basic rights, and even the other ones obviously had so many things that were there. So this national assembly that had been formed, or national constituent assembly that had been formed at that particular time, on August 4, 1789, they signed they signed a particular treaty among themselves, and that was that they ordered an issue of a particular certificate, and that was the marking of the next event that is going to be there. The next event that was there was the declaration of the rights of man and of citizens. Now guys, this is something which is extremely important and you need to understand. The term over here, declaration of the rights of man and of the citizens, holds the key, and it is very, very important. The assembly, it adopted this particular thing, and the basic purpose of it was what? Basically, the basic purpose of this thing, before moving on to that, you need to understand that this was inspired by whom? This was inspired by Jean-Jacques Rousseau and his philosophy that he had towards, revolutions and things like that. And the basic purpose that this thing had was what? It wanted to provide an equal opportunity, freedom of speech, popular sovereignty, and a representative government. So now if we have a look at it, basic rights that are required by any ordinary or any particular people was what? They wanted what? They wanted an equal opportunity in each and everything. Means monarch was something that they were now fed up with. They did not want any monarchy present in their particular country. So that was the thing that they wanted. They wanted equal opportunity. They wanted freedom of speech, that they should not be penalized if they say something. And thirdly, they wanted this thing out that there should be a popular sovereignty that should be present, and a government should be there that should represent them. Not like Louis XVI, who goes against the will and the wit and the likes of the people, and someone who does the things up only for his own particular purposes. So this was something that happened, and eventually then came the most drastic event in the history of the French Revolution, and that happened was what? That it turned radical. Now this basically, I would say, in other words, was the, I would say, the most unexpected event that if anyone would have thought that this French Revolution, which started off with a purpose, would eventually come into the hands of such people, and eventually this is what's gonna happen. Anyhow, guys, in April 1792, the new elected Legislative Assembly declared war on Austria and Prussia, and this was something that really marked it up. And eventually they even had formed a lot of different alliances that were present at that particular time. Now moving on to it, this basically happened to the major attack that was there, or in order to show something up to the people, they eventually went on under the rule of an extremist group known as the Jacobins. The Jacobins were the ones who attacked the royal residence in France and arrested the king on August 10, 1792. Now, this really marked the end of the ancient regime or monarchy in France. Eventually, what happened? He got captured and he got arrested. And undoubtedly, to his fate, the Legislative Assembly was then further, it was, it assigned, or it, had a lot of different decisions as far as King Louis XVI was concerned. And eventually what happened, that the Legislative Assembly, it got replaced by the National Convention. And the National Convention, I would say, was a more extremist part of the French Revolution. It was a regime that wanted to throw away or abolish all those particular things that come in its way. And eventually they abolished monarchy. And the first step that eventually they had to do was what? And they wanted to make France a French Republic. So the first thing was what? Get rid of Louis XVI. And that's what they did. On January 21, 1793, the king, obviously condemned of all the high treasons and all the particular things that were there, he was eventually guillotined. Now you guys need to understand the word and the term guillotine over here. Guillotine basically was gonna be the key that everyone remembered after that in history, in which the head of any particular individual gets chopped off because of the fact, and that too in front of everyone, up with a huge blade hanging on the top of it with his head tied and he's on his knees. That is going to be known as guillotine, and eventually, as the king never had expected, he got guillotined, and eventually his wife Marie Antoinette also suffered the same fate after 9 months of the execution of Louis XVI. That is what started the next event, which totally changed the history of the French Revolution to something that no one ever had expected. Next thing came was the Reign of Terror. The Reign of Terror marked the most vicious, the most inhuman, and the most dreadful event in the history of France, and not only France, but also the people who were present all along Europe who were afraid of what had taken place and what had happened at that particular time. Basically what, guys? This thing is something, if I talk about it, that in June 1793, yes, I would like to mention over here that what happened over here was this, that there was a guy known as Robespierre. He was the one who took hold of it, and you won't even know this thing up, that this is for your information. I would like to tell you people that there were round about 17,000 people who were officially guillotined in this particular time period, and that is why it is known as the Reign of Terror. All those people on whom there were death penalties that were done on them on the basis of any certain conception that was there regarding those people, without even giving them a free trial. This is what happened, and eventually on the figures, means if I take a look at the total number, it was 17,000 people who got executed, and that too in public, creating a huge fear among each and everyone who was present over there. At the end, now we come on to the Napoleonic rise, or the rise of Napoleon. And about Napoleon, I'll just tell you people one thing. There is a very famous saying that is said about this guy, that there was a time when he rose up, and this was the time when basically the National Convention, and after having a look at the Great Reign of Terror, basically there was a young successful general known as Napoleon Bonaparte who took over, and in that particular time period, there was eventually a thing that came up known as the Directory, and that was headed by Napoleon Bonaparte. Now Napoleon Bonaparte, basically, if I talk about his time duration and if I talk about him up, basically the Directory was something that eventually was the thing that he was following it up, but there was a time when he came in power and he eventually thought this thing up, and he saw each and everything up. He even abolished the Directory and eventually took over, and that was the time on November 1799, the time which really marked it up, as the leaders who were present at that particular time of this era, they had so many things that cope up, because for everything Napoleon was the one, or military was the one who was responsible for each and everything. So Napoleon decided that he had to end this so-called democratic system that was there in France, and he eventually took over, and that marked the era of Napoleon, known as the Napoleonic era. And France obviously would now dominate under his leadership. Now we are going to be obviously discussing it up, that what impact did he have on the continent of Europe. So I would end today's lecture on one particular thing, and that thing is going to be this: that there is a very famous saying that was used for Napoleon, and that thing was this: that when Napoleon sneezed, the entire Europe catches cold. So this is something that you can really come to terms with, and you can understand what it was all about, this particular guy. So guys, I hope you really enjoyed my lesson, and I hope that all the aspirants who want to opt for European history, this can give you a clear-cut idea and a very brief description regarding each and everything. And as you guys have showed all your love for us, and I would again like to mention this thing up, kindly subscribe to our channel and do press the bell icon. And I am going to be really grateful to you people, because the support that you people have provided us, it has really made me and my team so proud, and we are really encouraged, and we really would like to do further with you people. So thank you very much for your time. Take care. Allah Hafiz.